I have always been the one who called. Through 5 years of marriage, if there was silence between us, I was the one who broke it. If she was out, I checked in. If she was late, I texted first. If something felt off, I was the one who reached across it. I was the caller, the checker, the one who kept the line between us open, because I was always slightly afraid of what happened if I let it go quiet for too long. And then, one night, while she was out with friends, she sent me a text. 3 words. Don't call me. And something in me, something that had been patient and reaching and quietly exhausted for longer than I had admitted, went very still. I looked at those 3 words for a long time, and then I typed something back, something I had never said before, something I had never even let myself think before. And after I sent it, I sat in the quiet of our apartment and understood that everything was about to change. The man who always called. My name is Ben. I am 34 years old, and I want to be honest about something from the very beginning of this story. I was not a perfect husband, but I was a present one, perhaps too present, in the specific way of someone whose sense of security in a relationship is tied to constant contact. I checked in when she was out. I texted good morning every day without exception. I called on my lunch break not because anything was wrong, but because hearing her voice in the middle of the day felt like an anchor. She had found it endearing in the beginning. I know this because she told me, early on, that my consistency made her feel chosen, that she had dated men who disappeared for days without explanation, and that someone who simply showed up every day without being asked felt like something she had not known she needed. I had loved hearing that. I had built my entire approach to loving her around it. What I had not understood, until much later, was that what feels like security in the beginning of a relationship can begin to feel like pressure as the relationship matures. That the same consistency that made her feel chosen had gradually begun to feel, to her, like something she had to be available for, whether she wanted to be or not. I understand that now. I did not understand it the night she sent me 3 words from a bar somewhere across the city. The evening before the text. She had been going out more frequently, not alarmingly so, but noticeably. Where previously her social evenings had been occasional, once or twice a month, the kind of nights she came home happy and relaxed and full of stories, they had become more regular, every week, sometimes twice a week. I had not said anything about it, not because I did not notice, but because I did not want to be the husband who monitored his wife's social life. I believed she needed space. I believed healthy marriages included independent lives. What I had not fully processed was that my need for contact during those evenings had become a friction point. She would be out and I would text, check in, ask how the night was going, ask when she thought she would be home. She had mentioned once, lightly, almost as an aside, that it would be nice to have a night out without feeling like she needed to keep her phone nearby. I had heard it. I had told myself I would be better about it, and then the next time she went out, I texted anyway. Because the quiet of our apartment without her in it made me reach for my phone the way other people reach for something to hold when they are standing on unsteady ground. The text. It was a Friday night. She had gone out at 7. A group of her friends, people I knew and liked. A bar they went to regularly. The kind of evening that had a clear shape and a predictable end time. I had watched something on television, made dinner for myself, done the ordinary things a person does when they have an apartment to themselves on a Friday evening. At 9:15, I texted her. Nothing demanding, just, hey, how's the night going? I waited. No reply for 20 minutes. At 9:40, I texted again. All good? Just checking in. 5 minutes later, her reply arrived. 3 words. Don't call me. No period, no explanation, no softening around the edges, just, don't call me. I read it 3 times, and I sat with it in a way I had not sat with anything in a long time. Not the hurt of it, though there was hurt. Not the confusion, though there was confusion. Something underneath both of those things. A question I had been avoiding for longer than I wanted to admit. What were we actually doing here? I put the phone down first. I did not reply immediately. I made myself wait. Not as strategy, not to make a point, but because I knew that whatever I sent in the first 30 seconds of that feeling would come from the wrong place. I walked around the apartment for a while. Made tea I did not drink. stood at the window and looked at the street below for a few minutes. And then I picked up the phone. And I thought about what I actually wanted to say, not what I would have said 6 months ago, which would have been something conciliatory, something that absorbed the sharpness of her message and smoothed it over and kept the peace. But what I actually wanted to say, what was actually true. And I typed, "Okay, take all the space you need. I won't call. But when you're home tonight, I think we need to talk. Not about tonight, about everything. I've been quiet about some things for too long, and I think you have too. I love you, but something needs to change." I read it twice, and I sent it. And then I put the phone face down on the table, and I watched television until I heard her key in the lock. When she came home. She came in at 11:30. I heard her pause in the hallway, longer than usual. The pause of someone reading a message they had been thinking about for 2 hours. She came into the living room. She looked at me differently than she usually looked at me when she came home from a night out. Not with the easy, relaxed energy of someone who had had a good evening, with the specific attention of someone who had been thinking about something all night and was now standing in front of it. She sat down, not across from me, next to me, and she said, "I shouldn't have sent that the way I did." I said, "I knew." She said, "But you know why I did." And I said, "I think I do. And I think it's time we actually talked about it." The conversation. What followed was the most honest conversation we had ever had. Not the most comfortable, not the most easy, the most honest. She told me what she had been feeling, in a way she had circled around before but never landed on directly. That my need for contact when she was out had begun to feel like a tether. That she loved me but had started to experience my checking in as something she had to manage rather than something that made her feel cared for. That she had been pulling away, she could see that now, not because she wanted to leave, but because she had not known how to say any of this without it turning into a conversation about my feelings rather than hers. I listened to all of it. And then I told her what I had been feeling. That I had known something was shifting for months and had responded by reaching harder, which had made everything worse. That my need for constant contact was not really about her, that it was about something in me, a fear of disconnection that I had been carrying long before I met her, and that I had been unconsciously outsourcing to our relationship. That I had been making her responsible for my sense of security in a way that was not fair to either of us. She looked at me for a long moment when I finished, and she said, "Why have we never talked like this before?" I told her honestly, because I was too afraid of what would happen if we did. What the text had actually been. Here is what I understood, sitting in our living room at midnight on a Friday, about those 3 words, "Don't call me." She had not sent them to be cruel. She had not sent them as a sign of the marriage ending, or love disappearing, or contempt replacing connection. She had sent them because she had run out of gentler ways to say something she had been trying to say for months. And I, in my years of careful reaching and consistent calling and filling every silence before it could settle, had never given her a moment quiet enough to say it properly. The text had been sharp, but what it was pointing at was real. And the reply I had sent, the one I had never sent before, had been the first time in our marriage that I had pointed at something real in return. Not from fear, not to keep the peace, but because I was finally tired of the distance between what we were saying and what we meant. What changed things did not fix themselves overnight. That is not how real things work. But something shifted after that Friday, something fundamental in the structure of how we moved through our marriage. I got a therapist. Not couples therapy, individual therapy, because I understood clearly that my need for constant contact was mine to address, not hers to accommodate. What I found in those sessions was uncomfortable and clarifying in equal measure. The reaching, the filling of silences, the fear underneath the consistency that I had always called love, but that was at least partly something else. A need for reassurance that I had never examined clearly enough to address at its source. I stopped texting her when she went out. Not all at once. It took practice. The first few times she went out and my phone sat on the table untouched, I felt a physical discomfort that told me more about the habit than any conversation had. But I sat with the discomfort, and she came home. Every time. And gradually, the coming home became something she did because she wanted to, rather than because I had kept a thread between us tight enough to pull her back. Where we are now. I am 34 years old. My marriage is the quietest it has ever been. Quiet in the good way. The way that means two people are comfortable enough in the same space that they do not need to fill every silence to prove they are still connected. She goes out. I stay home. I do not text. And when she comes back fully. Present and warm and genuinely glad to be home in a way she had not been for a long time. Because home is no longer a place she has to be reachable from. It is just where she wants to be. And that difference is everything. What I want you to know. If you are someone who reaches constantly, who fills silences before they fully form, who calls and texts and checks in because the quiet feels like danger, I want to tell you something gently. That reaching is not always love. Sometimes it is fear wearing love's clothing. And the people we love cannot be both the source of our security and the object of our love at the same time. That is too much to ask of anyone. Find your ground in yourself first, and then reach from that ground. Not from the fear of what happens if you do not. Because love that is given freely feels completely different from love that is given because you are afraid of silence. And the person receiving it can always tell the difference. If this story reached somewhere real, if you have ever been the one who reaches too hard or the one who needed more space than you knew how to ask for, drop a comment below. Both sides of this are more human than most people admit out loud. Share this with someone who needs to hear that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is put the phone down and trust that what is real will still be there in the silence. Like and subscribe, because the next story is already waiting, and I promise you, it is one that will stay with you. See you there.